He must be removed before the council meets.
The Emperor suspects nothing.
Just imagine hearing those words. Not shouted in a senate, but cried out in private agony. They're the words of an emperor, Augustus, reportedly banging his head against the wall in his palace. It's the sound of an empire that thought itself invincible, suddenly finding out it wasn't.
What we're about to explore is a defeat so total, so utterly catastrophic, it didn't just cost thousands of lives, it slammed the brakes on the relentless Roman war machine. This one event drew a line in the sand, or, well, a line at a river, that would define Europe for the next 400 years. And the architect of this disaster? He wasn't some barbarian king from a distant land. No, he was one of Rome's own, a man they had raised, trained, and trusted completely. This is the story of Arminius.
So, how on earth did this happen? To get to the bottom of it, we have to understand the man at the very center of the storm. Arminius wasn't your typical tribal chieftain. He was a paradox, a man forged in the fires of two completely different cultures, caught between the wild, dense forests of his homeland and the ordered, marble world of the empire that raised him.
And this gets to a really brilliant and kind of cynical Roman strategy for controlling their frontiers. They take the sons of conquered chiefs and bring them to Rome, not as prisoners in chains, but as luxury hostages. Arminius was one of these kids. He was educated, taught Latin, learned Roman military tactics from the best. The whole idea was to Romanize the next generation of leaders, to turn them into loyal puppets. And usually, it worked like a charm. But with Arminius, this policy was about to backfire in the most spectacular way you can possibly imagine.
You can see his whole life path laid out here. He's born a German prince, but he spends his youth, his most formative years, in Rome. And he didn't just learn, he excelled. He climbed the ranks of the Roman army, serving with real distinction. He was granted full Roman citizenship, and even achieved the rank of equus, a knight, which was a huge deal. By the time he's sent back to Germania, he is, to his new boss, Governor Varus, the perfect poster boy for Roman influence. He was the loyal, capable, and completely trustworthy advisor.
And you can just feel the conflict brewing inside this one man. On one hand, you have the Roman world, all about order, law, taxes, and the power of the legions. On the other, the Germanic world, a world of fierce independence, tribal honor, and the untamed wilderness. Arminius didn't just know about both of these worlds, he lived in them. He understood Roman strategy, but he also felt the Germanic spirit. And it was this unique dual identity that would become his most powerful weapon.
And this is where everything changes. For years, Arminius played the part of the dutiful Roman officer perfectly. All the while, in secret, he was weaving an incredible web of conspiracy. He used his position of absolute trust to plan the ultimate betrayal, right under the nose of the governor who probably saw him as a friend.
Just look at this master plan. It was absolutely meticulous. Step 1. Spend years becoming Varus's go-to guy, earning his complete and unwavering trust. At the same time, step 2, do what everyone thought was impossible. Unite the Germanic tribes who are always fighting each other against a common enemy. Step 3, invent a fake rebellion in some remote corner of the territory to give Varus a reason to march. Then, the masterstroke. Step 4, suggest a shortcut for the army, a route through the Teutoburg forest, a route that he knew was a death trap. Every single step was a masterpiece of deception.
Now, Arminius wasn't doing this in a vacuum, of course. You had Varus, the Roman governor, maybe a little too arrogant, a little too sure of himself. You have Emperor Augustus back in Rome, dreaming of a grand new province. And then, crucially, you have Segestes. Now get this, Segestes was not only a German noble loyal to Rome, he was Arminius's own father-in-law, and he knew about the plot. He went directly to Varus and warned him, but Varus just brushed it off as a petty family feud, a catastrophic miscalculation that would cost him everything.
So completely confident in his friend Arminius and ignoring that critical warning, Governor Varus marched 3 of Rome's best legions, the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th, straight into the Teutoburg forest. The web was woven, the trap was set, and that forest was about to become a graveyard.
So why was this ambush so brutally effective? Well, it's all about the battlefield. Arminius was smart enough not to fight the Romans on an open field. That would be suicide. Instead, he chose a place that turned every single Roman strength into a crippling weakness. That famous Roman discipline? Useless when you can't even form a line. That heavy armor? Well, it just weighs you down in thick mud. The Germans, on the other hand, were in their element. They turned the trees and the terrain into their greatest allies. And then, as if on cue, the heavens opened up. A massive storm hits, turning the forest path into a swamp. The Roman column, already stretched out for miles and miles, is suddenly hit from all sides. Javelins and spears rain down from warriors they can't even see. It was utter chaos. The surprise was absolute.
The scale of this disaster is just hard to comprehend. We're talking about three entire legions. That's an army of over 20,000 people. Legionaries, support troops, camp followers, the whole thing, swallowed by the forest.
And it wasn't a quick battle. It was a running fight that lasted for 3 horrifying days. A slow, grinding, systematic slaughter in the mud and the rain. By the 3rd day, it was over. His army was in pieces, hope was gone, and Varus did what high-ranking Romans did when faced with total disgrace. He fell on his own sword. His suicide was the final signal. The command was gone, the battle was lost, it was annihilation.
When the news of this Varian disaster finally trickled back to Rome, the reaction wasn't just sadness or disappointment, it was pure unfiltered terror. An entire army gone? It was unthinkable.
Panic just ripped through the city. People were genuinely terrified that Arminius and his warriors would now cross the Rhine and pour into Gaul. Augustus was so spooked, he disbanded his own personal Germanic bodyguard, men who had been loyal for years. And then there's this. The numbers of the lost legions, 17, 18, and 19, were permanently erased from the Roman military lists. In an army where a legion's number was its honor, its entire history, this was the ultimate mark of shame, a permanent scar on the idea of an unbeatable Rome.
And beyond the immediate shock, this defeat forced a massive, permanent change in Roman strategy. The psychological blow had huge geopolitical consequences that would last for centuries. The grand Roman dream of conquering Germania Magna all the way to the Elbe River, well, that dream was dead, buried in the Teutoburg forest. The Rhine River, which was supposed to be a temporary frontier, became the permanent, heavily fortified border of the empire. Think about that. This one battle drew a line on the map of Europe that would basically separate the Latin-based world from the Germanic world forever.
Now, Rome did get a measure of revenge, you have to give him that. A brilliant general named Germanicus led several campaigns back across the Rhine. He beat Arminius in a few battles, and most importantly, he recovered 2 of the 3 lost golden eagles, the sacred standards of the legions, a huge boost for Roman morale. But even after these victories, the new emperor, Tiberius, called him back. Revenge was one thing, trying to conquer and hold that land was another. The lesson had been learned, and it was learned in blood.
So what about the architect of all this? The man who defeated Rome, the liberator of Germania. What was the fate of Arminius? And here is the ultimate tragic irony of his life. Arminius pulled off the impossible. He united the tribes and he beat the world's greatest superpower. But he couldn't keep that unity. The same old tribal rivalries and jealousies that he'd managed to suppress came roaring back. They started to fear his power, his ambition, and just 12 years after his incredible victory, Arminius was assassinated, not by a Roman dagger, but by the hands of his own people. And that leaves us with the big question. How do we remember a man like Arminius? Is he a national hero who freed his people from the jaws of an empire? Or is he the ultimate traitor, a man who betrayed his friends, his oath, and used the very education Rome gave him to slaughter the men he once called comrades? His story is such a powerful reminder that history is almost never a simple story of good guys and bad guys. So often, the line between a hero and a villain just depends on where you stand.